and welcome to Dragonfyre Designs. Today we're going to be talking about Mazinger Z, specifically this Papercraft model of Mazinger Z that you see next to me. And you heard that right, I built this entirely out of printer paper, or more specifically 110 cardstock that is a little bit thicker and heavier than standard printer paper. Now if you're not familiar with Mazinger Z, I'd say probably the very early 80s there were the Shogun Warriors, which were the jumbo machinder toys that were built from these very lightweight, kind of like vacuum formed plastic that was very much the same production style as what shampoo bottles were made out of. But, well, here, just take a look.
Imagine you enter the world of the Shogun Warriors. They're on the move. There's Raideen with Delta Wing missiles, Dragoon with a star shooter, and Mazinger with a rocket launcher. The Shoguns. Imagine you command them to defend freedom, protect justice, and challenge evil. The Shoguns. They're ready to strike when you are.
Those guys. So those toys were released when I was a kid, and my favorite was always the Great Mazinger, which unfortunately I didn't get. What I got was Dragoon. Cool in his own right, but still not Mazinger. I remember there was a kid across the street who had one, and I wanted to trade with that kid so badly, because what was really cool about Mazinger was that he had this rocket fist that fired rockets out of the fingers, and in the head there was a control ship that would separate out. Not every version had that. A lot of the American release versions didn't have that, but that ship was able to come out of his head, which was really, really cool. Never had one as a kid, so I was really excited now, many, many years later as an adult, to find a paper model of that available online. Now, as far as how you can go ahead and get these paper model patterns, the Papercraft is used with PDO and PDF files. When you download these, you're going to need Papercraft Viewer or Papercraft Designer. That is a freeware, and you can find it here. And when you go ahead and download that, you can open up those files. Now, how to find those files, there's a lot of communities on Facebook and on the internet. I found this particular pattern on, I think it was Papercraft Universe, and here's a link for it. Now you want to go through there and search in their files. You can do a search just for Mazinger Z, and they'll pull up several different files that people have posted. And within Papercraft Designer, you can resize that to anything that you want. I chose this size and scale because it's a lot easier to manage. It's not so small that the details are very hard to fold and get accurate, and it's not so large that it's difficult to display. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar with Papercraft or paper crafting, think of it this way. It's sort of combining some of the best elements of origami and model building. You're taking printed out patterns that start as a flat sheet that you'll cut, and using tabs and slot style gluing and folding, you're able to get some complex compound curvature and very detailed pieces. So it's not limited to just something like this. You can also end up getting, like they have a lot of spaceships, they have rockets, they have a lot of Japanese mecha, which is very popular, and even very organic characters are able to be achieved through this type of method of model building. And it's a really great community. A lot of people all across the world do it and are very supportive, and there's a lot of tips and tricks on how to put these things together, and I'll give you a couple of my own personal tricks that I use to get a very nice finished model. So let's go ahead and take a look real quick here at some of the process in order to build a Papercraft Mazinger Z. See, here is a typical printed sheet of the Papercraft pattern, and this here is an example of how some of the pieces are commonly cut out. Now you can see that there's quite a bit of tabs with notches, all that have to be cut in order to assemble a finished piece. Now here's a little pro tip on what I do in order to get my parts to come out smooth and appear as seamless as possible. Now once I've cut my printed pattern piece and I've glued it all together, if I notice that some of the seams are just not as clean and as invisible as I'd like, I'll take the piece and I will clear coat it with a clear acrylic spray. I'll hit it several times, and what that does is it gives it a sealed surface that you can then go and use glazing putty and cover over any seams that have large gaps that are just not meshing well. Once that dries, you can sand it, and that whole reason of putting the clear acrylic is to seal the surface so when you're sanding that you're not going to start tearing and wearing down the paper, because without it, I found your sandpaper, even a fine sandpaper, can start to kind of make the paper go fuzzy, and then it's a whole process of trying to get rid of that. So by pre-sealing it with a clear acrylic, I'm able to go with the glazing putty, sand that down nice and smooth, and a lot of my seams become almost invisible. So it really brings the quality of the model up. And when you're not using, like in the case of this one, you're not using a pre-shaded pattern, because some of the patterns, they do have the colors and gradient fades in them. When you don't have that as something to be concerned with, I do it as a straight white cardstock model, and then I go ahead and I do my own paint work on it and airbrushing, and you treat it as if it were an actual plastic model that way, and that'll give you a lot more invisible seams. The piece that I'm working on right now is going to form the foot, which will go right there on the bottom of the leg, obviously for Mazinger. What I want to do, which is a little bit different, sometimes with models and with papercraft figures, you want to weight the foot down, and people will use like little lead weights, or I've even, I remember being shown a trick of gluing pennies into the bottoms of the feet to give it a little bit of weight to add to the stability of a tall standing model. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to glue a heavy-duty magnet to the inside of the bottom of the foot, so that when I put this onto the base that it's going to stand onto, the entire figure is going to magnetize down to the base, and then should I have to dust and clean later on, I'll be able to remove the figure from the base. At least that's the theory. So I'm going to go ahead and assemble this with this glued into the inside of the foot, and we'll see how that works out. Now, another cool feature about this particular one, I wanted to have his parts metallic. So in all the areas where it's supposed to be silver, before I assembled the pieces, I actually just took some aluminum tape, which I purchased from the hardware store, and adhered that over the pattern pieces, and then went ahead and cut them out and assembled them, so that way I could get a nice brushed aluminum finish. And it turns out, in my opinion, a little bit better than if you were to just spray straight silver. Now here, we've run into a situation where, as I was starting the build-up on the rocket pack that goes on the back, the parts that I was building out of the cardstock were very small and hard to get large sausage fingers on to do work, and they came out pretty unsatisfactory. I'm not happy with how bumpy and just poor. This one's a little better than the other one, but this is not the quality that I want to be consistent with the rest of the build. Now, I could have kept printing out more patterns, trying to fold and glue till I went blind, but this is the thing. We are building a model, even though we're starting basically essentially with a cardstock model, a papercraft. This is the point where thinking outside of the box is going to yield a little bit better results. So what I did is I went to the dollar store and I decided we're going to scratch build these pieces. So I've got these dry erase markers, and the shaft is the same size and diameter as the main rocket pack, or booster rocket. And on the bottom of these there's supposed to be a little exhaust piece. Well, one of the great things with this pen here is that it's already got this nice slotted, vented end. So we're going to chop this, use the shaft of this, and then in order to get our tapered rocket cone, found these little pens here. Open this up real quick. And as you can see, we have a tip here. That's going to have to figure out how to remove that. But that tip, when added to that, combined with that, it's going to make us our booster rockets. So sometimes you just have to think a little bit outside the box. Closer look at how those rocket boosters turned out. That's a lot sharper and a lot cleaner than if I had tried to struggle through and do the paper ones. Now, as I had mentioned before, I wanted to go ahead and put magnets in the feet, and that was a feature to make it a little bit easier for the display base to be cleaned. I found in the past sometimes that when I had glued a finished model to the base and things got dusty over time, trying to clean around the model, it doesn't always work out so well. So this time I figured I would put magnets in the feet to allow the character to lift right off so the base can be cleaned, and then when I'm done, snaps right back into place on the base. Let's go ahead and take a look at some really nice shots of the finished piece.
空にそびえる黒金の城スーパーロボットマジンガー Z 無敵の力は僕らのために正義の心をファイルダウン飛ばせ鉄拳ロケットパンチ今だ出すんだプレストファイヤーマジンゴーマジンゴーマジンガ